The afternoon sun bathed Miami Beach in gold, creating the perfect setting for Richard Bennett, a 35-year-old billionaire, to momentarily escape the pressures of his work. As the owner of one of the nation's largest construction firms, Richard seemed to have it all: wealth, fame, and power. Yet deep down, he knew there was something missing, a void success couldn't fill. Adjusting his swimming goggles and preparing to dive into the water, Richard's sharp eyes caught an unusual movement on the waves. A young woman was flailing amidst the surf, her arms slicing the air in desperate motions. Her faint cries for help pierced through the tranquil silence of the private beach. Without hesitation, Richard dove in, his powerful strokes cutting through the water as he made his way toward her. As he drew closer, he could hear her panicked, broken whispers. "Help me!" "Stay calm, I'm here," Richard reassured her, his voice steady and firm. Wrapping his arm around her waist, he used his strength to guide them both back to shore. On the sand, the young woman collapsed, gasping for air, her dark hair plastered against her pale face. Despite her weakened and disheveled state, her honey-brown eyes struck Richard deeply. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Emily Carter," she replied weakly. "Thank you, you're so kind." Richard nodded slightly, offering a faint, reassuring smile. "No need to thank me. Just knowing you're safe is enough." Neither of them realized that this seemingly random encounter would change their lives forever. 5 years had passed since that fateful day on Miami Beach. Richard Bennett was now a man at the pinnacle of his career, but he had been forced to step away from it all. Years of relentless work and mounting stress had resulted in temporary vision loss caused by an ocular hemorrhage. Doctors warned that without rest and strict adherence to his treatment plan, he risked permanent blindness. In his luxurious penthouse in Chicago, Richard lived a life confined to darkness. His family, worried for his health, hired a private nurse to assist him during his recovery. The nurse they chose was Emily Carter, now a professional with years of experience. The moment Emily stepped into the penthouse, her heart raced. She recognized Richard instantly, but he couldn't see her. Summoning her courage, she spoke in a calm yet gentle voice. "Good afternoon, Mr. Bennett. I'm Emily Carter, your new nurse." Richard paused for a moment. Her voice, there was something familiar about it, but he couldn't place why. In the first few days, Emily focused on her duties, helping Richard adapt to assistive devices and accompanying him to his vision therapy sessions. Though she tried to maintain a professional distance, the guilt of her past weighed heavily on her. She wondered if Richard would ever realize she was the woman he had saved 5 years ago. Despite his inability to see, Richard found comfort and trust in Emily's presence. But every time she spoke, the feeling of familiarity stirred stronger within him. "How long have you been doing this kind of work?" he asked one day, trying to piece together the puzzle her voice created. "Long enough to know that every patient needs more than just medical care. They need empathy," she replied, keeping her tone steady. Richard smiled, but the questions lingered in his mind. Emily, meanwhile, wrestled with the fear that her secret might come to light, even as her feelings for Richard grew deeper with each passing day. Fate had reunited them, but this time, the story was only just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Richard and Emily developed a bond neither of them had anticipated. Therapy sessions became more than just physical recovery. They became opportunities to share stories and open up to each other. Richard talked about the immense pressure he faced at work, the loneliness wealth couldn't dispel. Emily listened carefully, though she remained cautious, fearing her past would ruin everything. One afternoon, while Emily was reading aloud from one of Richard's favorite novels, he suddenly interrupted her. "Miss Emily," he said thoughtfully, "there's something about you. Your voice, it makes me feel like we've met before." Emily froze for a moment, her heart pounding, but she quickly composed herself. "Perhaps I just have one of those voices," she replied, trying to steer his thoughts elsewhere. Richard smiled faintly, but even without sight, his expression conveyed curiosity. "Maybe, but it feels special." As their relationship deepened, Claire Davenport, Richard's fiancée, made an unannounced visit to the penthouse. Claire embodied societal perfection, beautiful, accomplished, and ambitious. From the moment she met Emily, her suspicion was evident. One evening, as Claire was organizing files in Richard's penthouse, she stumbled upon an old photo tucked away in a drawer. It was a picture of Richard from years ago, standing on Miami Beach, his arm around a drenched woman. Claire stared at the photo, narrowing her eyes. "This can't be," she muttered, scrutinizing the image. The woman in the photo bore an undeniable resemblance to Emily. Confronting Emily directly, Claire's tone was sharp and cold. "I know who you are," she began, holding up the photo. "You're the woman Richard saved that day in Miami." Emily froze, her face turning pale. I can explain." "Don't bother," Claire cut her off. "You deceived him then, and now you're doing it again. I'll make sure he knows the truth." Later that evening, Claire revealed Emily's secret to Richard in a confrontational manner, hoping it would destroy Emily's credibility. To her shock, Richard responded with calm resolve. "She already told me," he said firmly, his tone unwavering. "What she did in the past wasn't right, but that doesn't define who she is today. Emily has changed, and I trust her in ways I've never trusted you." Claire's face fell. "You're making a mistake, Richard," she warned. "No," Richard replied, his voice resolute. "The mistake was not realizing sooner that you and I were never right for each other." "Be just a nurse," Claire said coldly during a private conversation with Richard. "I think we need to find someone more professional. You don't need unnecessary familiarity." Richard tried to calm Claire, but deep down he knew their relationship had lost its meaning long ago. What had once been a romantic connection had turned into a partnership of convenience, driven by family expectations rather than love. Meanwhile, Emily felt the weight of Claire's disapproval. The tension between her and Richard's fiancée only heightened her fear that her secret might come to light. One evening, after Claire had left, Richard sat quietly on the balcony with Emily. "What do you think of Claire?" he asked unexpectedly. Emily hesitated. "I think she cares about you, in her own way." Richard chuckled bitterly. "That's not love. I think I've spent too long living for others." His words hit Emily hard. She realized she was falling for Richard, but her past kept her from moving closer. The tension escalated when Claire arranged a family meeting to convince Richard to replace Emily. However, Richard, having realized his true feelings, made a bold declaration. "This is my life. I need someone I trust, and that person is Emily." Richard's response left Claire speechless, but it also set him and Emily on a path filled with even greater challenges from society and family. The tension between Richard, Claire, and Emily continued to grow. Richard and Emily's bond seemed to deepen with each passing day, but Emily's secret loomed over them like a ticking time bomb. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, the quiet interrupted only by the soft rustle of the wind, Richard broke the silence. Before her confession, Emily stood on the balcony alone, gazing out at the city lights shimmering like stars. Despite the beauty of the view, her heart felt heavy. She clutched the railing, her thoughts racing. "What if he hates me? What if this ruins everything?" she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. Returning to sit beside Richard, her hands shook slightly as she clasped them together. As she began to speak, her voice faltered. "Richard, there's something I need to tell you." After her confession, when Richard didn't respond immediately, Emily felt a sharp pang of regret. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know the truth because you deserve that much. You've given me a chance to be better, and I couldn't keep lying to you." "Emily," he began, his tone thoughtful, "I can't stop thinking about your voice. There's something so familiar about it, but I can't figure out why." Emily froze. This was the moment she had dreaded most, but she knew she couldn't keep the truth hidden any longer. With a trembling voice, she began. "Richard, there's something I need to tell you," Emily began, her voice trembling. She hesitated, her heart pounding as she weighed the consequences of her confession. "I didn't think we'd ever meet again, but fate had other plans." Richard frowned. "Meet again? What are you talking about?" Emily took a shaky breath, her eyes filling with tears. 5 years ago, I was the woman you saved on Miami Beach. But it wasn't an accident. I faked drowning to get your attention, and I've regretted it every day since. Silence fell between them. Richard stared ahead, stunned. "You're saying you pretended? Why?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "I was a different person back then, led astray by bad decisions. I needed money and was manipulated by people I trusted. But when you saved me, when I saw the genuine concern in your eyes, I couldn't go through with it. That moment changed my life. After that day, I vowed to become better." Richard turned away, his voice cold. "You used my kindness." "Yes," Emily admitted, her voice breaking. "But you also saved me, not just from the water, but from the life I was living. I worked hard to change, to earn an honest living. When I took this job, I thought it would be a way to atone. But now, I realize I've fallen in love with you." Richard sat in silence, his emotions in turmoil. He felt betrayed, yet he couldn't deny the transformation Emily had undergone. Days passed in tension. Claire, sensing the growing distance between her and Richard, decided to confront him. "Richard, I can't keep doing this. If you don't want to be with me, just say it," she demanded. Richard looked at her, his voice calm but resolute. "Claire, I'm sorry. Our relationship has lost its meaning. I can't continue." Claire left, leaving Richard to reflect on everything. He realized that his feelings for Emily were genuine, and that her past couldn't erase the redemption she had achieved. One morning, Richard called Emily to his side. "Emily," he said, his blind eyes searching for her, "I've thought a lot about this. The past can't be undone, but I see the person you are now, and I choose to trust you, to trust us." Tears streamed down Emily's face as relief and joy filled her heart. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. After deciding to place his trust in Emily, Richard began a journey of recovery that was as much emotional as it was physical. With Emily's support, he attended weekly vision therapy sessions, adjusted his diet, and learned techniques to manage stress. Emily became an indispensable part of Richard's life during this difficult period. She helped him adapt to assistive devices like a guiding cane and text-to-speech readers. Every morning, she prepared his coffee and read him the news, helping him stay connected to the outside world. Though their bond deepened, Emily couldn't shake her apprehension. She knew the day Richard regained his sight would be a turning point. Would he still love her once he saw her face? One day, after a particularly challenging therapy session, Richard asked Emily to sit with him for a while. "Emily," he began, his deep voice calm, "you've done so much for me, I don't know what I'd do without you." Emily smiled, but her eyes held a trace of sadness. "It's my job, Richard, but you've also done so much to fight through this yourself." Richard paused, as if searching for the right words. "Not everyone is willing to stand by someone in their darkest moments, but you have. That means more to me than anything I've ever known." Emily's emotions grew stronger with each passing day, but she maintained her professionalism. "I just want you to know you're not alone, and I'll always be here." As time went on, Richard began to show signs of improvement. He could detect faint light and basic shapes, giving him hope. Every small victory felt monumental, and he shared each one with Emily, as if she was the first person he wanted to celebrate with. One evening, as Emily was getting ready to leave, Richard called her back. "Do you ever think we met not by chance, but by fate?" Emily was taken aback by his question, but responded with a gentle smile. "Maybe fate isn't what happens to us, but how we choose to face it." They didn't yet realize that their journey wasn't just about physical recovery, but the foundation for a love that was quietly blooming. The day had finally arrived for Richard to remove his eye bandages. In the quiet clinic, Emily sat by his side, holding his hand tightly. She was both hopeful and anxious. This was the moment that would change everything. "We'll take this slowly," the doctor instructed. "Richard, as I remove the bandages, open your eyes gradually. Don't rush." Emily could feel the tension in Richard's hand. As the final layer of bandages came off, he kept his eyes closed, as directed. "Now, open your eyes slowly," the doctor said softly. Richard blinked, faint light beginning to filter through. "I can see. Light," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "It's still blurry, but I can see." Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks. as she watched him smile for the first time in months. Richard slowly turned toward her, his eyes beginning to focus. "Emily," he whispered, his voice trembling as tears welled in his eyes. I can't believe it. You're even more beautiful than I ever imagined." His words faltered as raw emotion overtook him. Emily broke into tears, her voice breaking. "I was so afraid that when you saw me, everything would change." Richard reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek, his gaze unwavering. "Nothing could ever change how I feel. Seeing you now only confirms what I've always known. I loved you in the darkness, and I love you even more in the light." Months later, at Miami Beach, where it all began, Richard and Emily held a small wedding ceremony. Under the golden hues of the setting sun, they exchanged heartfelt vows. "Emily," Richard said, his voice filled with emotion, "your love helped me see more clearly, not just with my eyes, but with my heart. I promise to love you forever." "Richard," Emily replied, her voice trembling, "you gave me hope and the strength to change. I promise to stand by your side in light or darkness." Beneath the twilight sky, they sealed their vows with a kiss, completing a journey that began with redemption and ended in love. Together, they embarked on a new future, a love that had not only transformed their lives, but inspired so many others. Following their heartfelt wedding on Miami Beach, Richard and Emily began their married life filled with happiness and hope. Preparing for their first child brought new challenges and joys to their lives. One evening, Richard was determined to assemble the crib himself, refusing Emily's help. Hours later, Emily found him sitting amidst scattered parts, looking defeated. "What are you doing?" she asked, stifling a laugh. "I thought I didn't need the instructions, but clearly I was wrong," he admitted with a sheepish grin. They spent the rest of the evening working together, painting the nursery walls a soft pastel blue and carefully arranging the furniture. "This will be a place where she feels safe and loved," Richard said, his voice filled with hope. When Sophie was born, Richard was overwhelmed as he held her for the first time. Looking at her tiny hand wrapped around his finger, he whispered, "You're so small, but you've already made me feel like the luckiest man alive." Together, they built a home full of love and dreams, supporting each other through every step of their journey. Together, they envisioned the Horizon Foundation, a place where Richard's resources and Emily's expertise could create tangible change. Late nights were spent planning, dreaming, and debating how to reach as many people as possible. The foundation would focus on providing support for individuals with vision loss and creating pathways for those seeking second chances, much like the journey they had shared. With Emily's expertise in healthcare and Richard's business acumen, the organization quickly became a beacon of inspiration and positive change in society. Their daily life was harmonious and filled with simple yet meaningful moments. Each morning, Emily prepared breakfast while Richard brewed coffee, a routine he had cherished since his days without sight. They enjoyed walks together, discussed the foundation's projects, and shared the joys of a peaceful life. A few months into their marriage, Emily began feeling different. She often felt tired and noticed subtle changes in her body. A visit to the doctor confirmed the life-changing news. She was pregnant. When Emily shared the news with Richard, he stood still for a moment before breaking into a radiant smile. "Emily, you've just given me another reason to live and love," he said, pulling her into his arms. Throughout the pregnancy, Richard was a devoted husband. He accompanied Emily to every prenatal appointment, prepared the nursery, and ensured she felt loved and supported at all times. On a crisp spring morning, the first cry of baby Sophie echoed in the hospital room. As the nurse placed the tiny bundle in Emily's arms, both she and Richard were overcome with tears of joy. Sophie had Emily's warm brown eyes and Richard's radiant smile, lighting up the room with her presence. "He's perfect," Richard whispered, gazing at his daughter's delicate face. In the days that followed, their home was filled with laughter and love. Sophie quickly became the center of their world. Emily sang lullabies to her, while Richard took on the role of storyteller, weaving magical tales before bedtime. Though life had its challenges, their love and unity helped them overcome every obstacle. Richard often remarked, "Sophie is the symbol of the love we've built. Seeing her every day is a reminder of what truly matters." As they continued their journey, They embraced their roles as husband and wife and as parents, creating a life filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities for the future.